Welcome to the Gotham Outsiders, a very special episode. I have a bat in my house and it's about the only thing I can think of right now. I'm your host, Bat Obsessive Chris, and possessing one fewer bat than me, my co-host TJ.
Hello, everyone. I am your Chris proclaimed Batman acolyte, and we have a very exciting guest with us today.
Yes, we do. We have with us the legendary comics writer, the first woman to write an ongoing bat title, Devin Grayson.
Hello. I don't have a bat in my house and I'm very jealous.
You can have mine. They are far cuter on panel.
Oh gosh. It's just flying out of the window at you. You're gonna go fight crime, Chris.
We've joked about my villain origin story, but it turns out maybe I was the vigilante all along.
Life's tricky that way.
Just comes at you fast, like a bat.
Well, Devin, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a long
My
time
pleasure.
coming.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yes, we're so excited.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I think it's so much fun to have different voices in the podcast space, and you guys talk about my absolute favorite thing, which is Gotham and Batman and all that good stuff.
Ooh, well, to start out, we have a warm-up question for you.
Okay.
Who, in your opinion, is the best Bat detective, like in the Bat family?
I mean, besides Batman?
It could be Batman.
Including, because we've had people disagree that it isn't Batman. So
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, so in addition to being a writer, I'm a role player and a fanfic writer. And so when a question like that comes up, my brain always goes into dick mode, and the only possible answer is Batman. So I would have to really work to move his voice out of my head to answer differently. And I think I could defend that answer. I would go with that.
TJ's mind also goes into dick mode pretty frequently.
You beat me to it. I was definitely going to make a dick mode joke.
We were rushing to the button on that one.
Yep.
What do you guys think?
I mean,
Ooh.
I think it's Tim Drake, and I've always said that it's Tim Drake. I think he is better than Batman, and Ra's al Ghul agrees with me.
I am far less educated, so like I don't know. I feel like Tim found out who Bruce was, but it's like, all right, I don't know. I feel like Bruce might just be the default answer.
Right. I mean, now and then I'm thinking about it, I guess Oracle back when she was really fully oracling has pretty, because I think the argument for Tim over Bruce would in part be technology, right? And that he's more comfortable with some of the more modern methods of exploration and mining data, whereas Bruce is more likely to actually hit the streets and or people if necessary to get information.
That's a good point.
So if we were going that way for Tim, then I think I go, yeah, but even more than Tim, Barbara at that point spent all her time doing that and could answer any question, hence her moniker.
Yeah, my argument for Tim is usually that he figured out who Batman was, and Batman still gets tricked by fake siblings sometimes. So
that's fair.
I'm just saying.
I think Tim himself would be very flustered if you said that, though.
It would be very cute and charming.
They need to be thinking about it 48 hours later. Could that be true? Is that possible? I mean, I'm pretty good. Well, but I don't know. Anyway.
Oh my God, it's a whole fanfic. Yes, write a whole fanfic about it, please.
You got it.
Please,
on it.
please. Yes. I love it. So you were, as we mentioned, the first woman to create, launch, and write a new ongoing Bat title. What was the experience like for you?
It was so exciting. I didn't really get the first woman part. I'd come to DC Comics specifically to work with Batman and the Bat family, and had sort of had that one singular shining goal, and to have it sort of unfold with Denny O'Neil just saying, okay, if you were going to launch a new Bat title, what would it be about? And I ecstatically launched into my pitch about the Bat family and how we really had to fictionally pin down why this loner had so many people around him and what that meant. I completely understood the marketing logic for it, but that doesn't really count when you're reading the stories. So he liked that idea and said, great, do it. And it was literally a dream come true. I spent at that point, 4 or 5 years of my life just trying to get to that exact moment. So it was amazing.
Yeah.
And the first time I wrote Batmobile and realized I was getting paid for it, I just fell off my chair laughing for like 10 minutes with delight, you know.
That is beautiful.
That's awesome.
That
Or you
is
put
beautiful.
Batman and then you have that space and you're like, I'm about to put words in his mouth. It's so weird, you know. And of course he's a genius and I'm not, but I did the best I could do, and I love those relationships, and so that's really what I was trying to honor.
Oh, I love that. And now we have Mariko Tamaki, who is only the second woman on one of
Right.
these flagship books.
So
from your-
excited for her.
yes, we are too. We love her. What is your perspective on it taking so long to get another woman writer on one of these titles, though?
Oh, well, so it's a great question that I think has a pretty simple answer, which is unfortunately Dan DiDio. 20 years ago, when I was fired by him, I said, no one else is getting in until he goes. 20 years later, he goes, and literally the next year they have another female writer. So I can kind of rest my case. Yeah. And that's sad, but it's a powerful reminder of how much the people in charge matter, you know. And I think I've said before that, you know, trickle down economy is a joke, but trickle down corporate culture is a very real thing. And the people at the top are setting an agenda and a mood, and what they care about is going to slowly work its way into everything that comes out from that corporate entity. And that's what we saw there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I appreciate you being so upfront.
I sort of
someone needs to say
it. Yeah. For a long time, you don't ever want to step on your relationships with them. And I still love DC and a bunch of the editors there. But I sort of got to the point where I'm far enough along. I need to be one of the brave ones and just say it, so that other people who still can't don't have to. But I did do a lot of interviews where I was like, it's really obvious, just connect the dots. There's one person, you know.
Oh, well, we applaud you.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You. Oh, thank you.
And how do you feel, completely changing the tone here, about Dick's infamy as the best butt in DC Comics?
Well, I love it, and I think it's funny, but I did see, well, and funny and actually healthy, I would argue. You know, it's good to have that kind of joke, and it's because comics, especially superhero comics, do tend to be so sexualized. It was nice to have a male entry into all of that. But I have seen readers on Twitter especially being really upset by it and feeling like it's over sexualized, or that, you know, that we're laughing about something that shouldn't be laughed about. And so I'm trying to be sensitive to that, but I haven't quite wrapped my head around their argument.
Right.
Because
I've definitely heard that.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like Dick himself would laugh it off. So we should too.
Yeah, like women are so over sexualized in comic books. Like, let one of the men be sexualized. And at the same time, like, don't lose the fact that Dick is more than just his butt, you know?
Well, exactly. Yes. I mean, I think that's why he's such a good poster child for it, because we could joke about it all day long and we know that's not even his, you know, number one quality.
His main asset.
Yeah. So good, Teach. So good.
Thank you, Devin.
Yes, we love and support his butt on this podcast.
Excellent. Like, yeah, how can that be unhealthy, really?
Not that his butt needs support. It's doing great.
Well, and it's also, I mean, you know, his costumes, like, I just really feel like there's a lot there to work with.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
And you know, we can't see Batman. He wears a cape.
What's he hiding?
What's that compensating for, Bruce? Oh, we're off to a silly start. I
love it. It's perfect. So you are known for your Nightwing and Gotham Knights runs. Did you approach team books differently from solo titles when writing? Did you prefer one style to another? And was one more challenging than another?
They are definitely different. I don't think I approached them differently, because for me, the themes were very similar. Both Gotham Knights and my Titans run were absolutely 100% about family, just different shapes of made family. Nightwing was different because for Dick, I chose to have a first person narrator. I thought his voice should be present, and he's the kind of person that talks to himself and us all day long. So that made sense. Whereas it makes much less sense in a Batman comic, like he's not going to be sharing those thoughts with us. But the Bat family is Dick's primary family and is really his family of origin at this point, and the Titans are his peer family and the one he's created. So those the thematic issues that I was exploring were very similar. The reality of working with, say, the Bat office versus the Titans office, which is code for every single frickin' office in the building, right?
Yeah.
That was very different. And like I've always thought the relationship between Dick and Wally, for instance, was really important. And within, I don't know, 2 issues of my run, after I insisted up and down he needed to be there, yeah, he's being used in an event, he's got to go, you can't have, there were just things like that happening constantly. And the pinnacle of this was JLA Titans that I did with Phil Jimenez, and we had to clear every single beat with every single editor in the building. And I remember a day where we were literally running up and down the halls going, well, what if we did it like this? Would that be okay? And yes, no. Oh, okay, back to square one.
Oh, wow.
So it was crazy, but it's part of the game, and you sort of learn to love it because you have to.
Yeah,
that's one thing I actually tell people a lot when they are wanting to break into comics and telling me about their one great idea. And I sort of, gently remind them it really isn't about one great idea. And in fact, I can almost guarantee that idea will never see the light of day. You're going to have several ideas, and then you're going to have to be very flexible about those ideas. Things are constantly changing. It's very rare to get something cleared and be able to go all the way through without any of your story beats being interrupted by something happening somewhere else.
Yeah, when I'm reading, whenever it gets to a big crossover, I'm like, God damn it.
That's how we felt too.
Yeah, okay, it's good to know the struggle is on both sides.
Well, and I honestly, it's weird. Like, again, from a marketing point of view, I completely understand why they do it. And even from a reader's point of view, it can be really fun if it's a well thought out, engaging, whatever, event that actually utilizes all the characters in some unique way that teaches you more about them. That can be really powerful. But I don't think most people go back and read comics like June 1997. I'm going to go lay them all out. Like, we read runs and titles and characters, and comics has been sort of weirdly bad about laying things out that way. And even when I was first sort of trying to catch up, because I didn't grow up reading comics, and when I fell down the bat hole, I had a lot of catching up to do. So I ran out and I got a whole bunch of, I guess it was the new Titans issues, but there were 2 completely separate runs of that. And I didn't know enough about comics to be paying attention to the numbering. So I sort of mixed those 2 runs together. And I'm like, man, Corey really comes and goes. Like, is she just like, is she back on her home planet? Where'd she go? And it took me a couple months to go, oh, wow, I'm mixing 2 completely different stories. And
that is so real. We go back and read trades, trade paperbacks a lot of the time. And sometimes we'll be like, wait, what just happened? And you'll just see that little footnote, and it's like, all of this was explained in this issue that is not included in this. And you're like, thank you.
Potentially not even available, right?
Right. Yeah. You will never find this answer. Like, oh, thanks.
I mean, I guess in that way, it's a little like real life things. We don't remember things in order, and there are details. Well, you can't ask grandma about that now,
Did you have a favorite member of the Bat family to write, or a favorite relationship? And if your answer is Dick Grayson, who's your runner-up?
So yeah, I think obviously for me, the main focus was on Dick and Bruce and their relationship. And I was just utterly, endlessly fascinated with that. But the clear runner-up for me was Alfred. And in my mind, that was a family, and he was the mom in the house. And I just, and
Best
I love
mom.
that. It's so good, so gracious, so caring, and so forgiving of the very difficult charges that he has to look out for. Those are not easy people to care about and try to keep safe. And he did it with such grace. And
we love Alfred.
Love him.
We do. Alfred is the greatest of all time. He just is.
I can't remember if I ever got this on the page. I hope I did, but in my headcanon, Dick gave him Mother's Day cards every year. So.
Oh. Oh, I love that.
There's a recent Jason Todd story where he's like, oh, I had a good dad. And then the next panel is Alfred and it says, I had a good mom.
Yeah, there you
It's like,
go.
yes.
It's so true.
It
And especially
is.
when you're creating family, the way queer culture often has to, and
Yes.
superhero culture often has to, you know, you need to be flexible about who's doing what roles. And I think really the Bat family illustrated that beautifully.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's the common term of the mom friend now, right? Like
Right,
in that
right.
friend group,
It's
right?
Alfred.
Yeah.
Alfred is the ultimate mom friend.
100%. And if you go like, I need to see my mom friend and drink some wine, like the wine he will uncap for you will be primo.
Oh, yes. 100%.
He's not great at gossip though. He's just weirdly, you know, closed-lipped. He doesn't talk about anything.
That's true. That is true. So for you, what story arc, issue, or plot moment are you most proud of to this day?
Wow.
Yeah, no tall pressure or tall order there.
Well, one of the most personal and most fun for me was the Hugo Strange arc in Gotham Knights. And that's because my mom was a psychologist. So, and I sort of turned her into a supervillain in a way. And that was really fun and cathartic.
Yeah.
And also because of her, I felt like I understood a lot of the language that someone like Dr. Hugo Strange would use. And really loved having an excuse to explore some of the relationship dynamics through an outsider's eyes, like instead of just leaving Bruce and Dick to figure their things out, what happens when you throw someone else there watching them do it. So I really enjoyed and felt in my element in that. I mean, the favorite project's always the most recent project, and I'm obviously super excited about Rewild, which we'll get to soon, but in the Batverse, that's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
His mom isn't a supervillain these days.
So, changing gears again, in the past, there's been a lot of controversy around Dick Grayson's heritage as a Roma person.
Mm-hmm.
Reflecting back, how do you feel about this depiction?
Well, somebody told me that I started it. I kind of doubt that. Is that true?
It's, as far as we know, that's true.
Okay, maybe it is. To me, it just made sense. I love sort of putting together fictional clues and trying to, if all of these absolutely insane things happened, what does it mean about who these people are? And so if we look at his background and what we knew about Haley's circus and just even the coloring that was used for his, I don't know. To me, it seemed obvious that that would be the roots of at least his father's side of the family, and that it was way more interesting, both in terms of better representing that itinerant circus culture, that's sort of an interesting way to look at that, but also then the dynamic of the sort of socioeconomic dynamic that creates between him and Bruce becomes even more charged. These characters, I guess we're making things up and deciding things, but it really feels like you're just meeting someone and they're telling you about themselves. And that was my experience with that. It just seemed undeniably true, and I ran with it and nobody stopped me. If since then people sort of whitewashed it, that seems really sad and a loss. And I would question why that was done.
Yeah.
Well, I know in the most recent issue of Tom Taylor's Nightwing, it got mentioned. So it's still like popping up here and there.
Good, yeah.
And according to some Wikipedia page, you were the one that was the first one to introduce this. So it's cool that you introduced such a big major part of that character.
I guess that could be true, because now that I'm thinking about it, what I went and did was a bunch of research on contemporary and 1940s circuses. That's the other fun thing about these characters, right? They're saddling these very different eras, and you have to sort of make sense of all of that. But that's where that took me, and I read just a fascinating book on the Calderasha, and it really spoke to me, and I thought, that's got to be part of Dick's story.
And you've talked in the past about Dick Grayson's sexuality. What did you imagine his identity as when writing him?
Well, for me, he's always been bisexual, and maybe even more than that. I'm almost like he's such a physical person, and I think all relationships for him first come through the body. I don't know the extent to which he would be conscious of that. And I, of course, was very conscious of knowing that DC wasn't going to let me put that out on the page in any clear way at the time I was writing. I was, really excited to see the recent developments with Tim, but that couldn't have happened back when I was, that was 20 years ago and they weren't ready. Right. But to me, unquestionably, his attraction is sort of omni-attracted. Yeah.
We have an agenda on this show that every Robin is some sort of queer.
Yes.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. We're one Robin down.
We've got Tim. We're coming for the rest.
Excellent. I think there's a really good case for that. And it would be fascinating to then take that back to Bruce and go, okay, well, what does this mean? These are the young men you just happened to attach yourself to. Ooh. Any comments, Mr. Wayne?
And what does that say for our Super Bats agenda? That's what I would.
Exactly.
Well, if every Gotham City siren can be queer or bisexual, why can't every Robin?
Exactly.
Yeah, yes. I like it. I'm with you guys. I'm
yes.
With
I have to credit Alex Jaffe, a guest of ours, that said that to me, and a light bulb went off, and it's been my motto.
Excellent.
Yes, that's what we live by now. Well, speaking of how you wrote Dick's sexuality, there were different times in the comics where it appears to readers, perhaps like us who are maybe reading into it, that he is attracted to either Bruce or Slade at different times in your run. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about that aspect? Was that intentional?
It is intentional. It's so, how do I explain it? To me, the most interesting knot in Dick's relationship with Bruce was the idea that throughout his childhood, he had such a clear and important role, but with very strange verbiage. The word that was used was ward, which is a very cool clinical, like if you're a kid, that does not tell you where you stand. I was ward, but sidekick does, partner does, and of course, Robin, who he got to decide what that meant the first time and really imbued that term and that role with so much loyalty and dedication. But I think so in my mind, as he gets older, he starts to get nervous about what's going to happen when he turns 18 and what are the boundaries of Bruce's dedication to him and need for him. What is his role in this man's life? And by then he's getting old enough to realize that Bruce is a very complicated guy. It's not going to be an easy path. And I think one of the things Dick sort of seizes on as he's going through all that is, well, we could be lovers, then he'd have to keep me here. But it's all really about loyalty and devotion and trying to find a way to stay relevant and attached. But of course, the minute that idea flits through his head, he starts to sort of feel out around it, and that just freaks Bruce out, and Bruce pulls back. So then we have the what is it, the immovable object and the irresistible force, right? So then they're locked in this dynamic that neither one of them can let go of because Bruce flinched, basically. And that tension right there is sort of where I liked to keep them when I was writing them. They're sort of still, through most of my run until the adoption, they're working through that unspoken fight, basically.
That's really interesting. And we talked a lot about the 60s Batman show and coming off of that and reading Cape Crusade by Glenn Weldon. I can see where your perspective is coming from. I think that's really complicated and interesting. Of course, nowadays, a lot of readers wouldn't be down for it, but I think there's something there to unpack.
Well, and I was able to do it a little bit under the radar. That was 100% what I was thinking, but I don't, you'd have to be doing a queer reading to pick up on it. So.
Right. Yeah. What is your reaction to sort of that fan backlash to ships like Dick and Slade?
I haven't seen that because I always get targeted with the tarantula backlash. That was 20 years ago, and that's the only thing that people come at me about. So what is the backlash about the Bruce Dick thing?
I think people on Twitter, it's so hard to explain backlash. I think I see people on Twitter call it batcest, which, implying that it's incest.
Right. Well, okay. No, I can see that if you're really invested in them as a family unit, that could feel disturbing. And I'm old enough to have had to defend fanfics to even
Yeah.
older people who are like,
Yep.
why can guys not just be friends? Why are they always sexual? And, I sort of laughed and,
Yeah.
it's complicated, but I understand that's a completely valid concern. Platonic male friendship is very important, and it is weird that it shows up so infrequently and it generates so many raised eyebrows in female-driven fan fiction, and that's a whole huge topic we could explore.
Yeah.
But in my reading, at least, of that relationship, both those things were true. It was in fact the dedication to family and to creating some kind of lasting connection that triggered that response.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And like, there's been how many reboots now? Like, what? Because right now, like, Bruce is like, "Oh, Dick is my son," and that's what readers reading the current reboot, that's their dynamic that they've grown up with. But it hasn't always been like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. It's a fair adjustment, especially if we're looking at the way language evolves. Like, there's no way he would have been adopted in the 80s and called a ward, right? But it changes everything. Just a little word.
Do you have any favorite Bat family ships?
Oh, well, that one for sure. I love the Barbara Helena Dick triangle.
Ooh, yes.
I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, because both of those women are smart enough to realize that, like, when this guy's with you, he's 100% there, and the minute he's out of sight, he's 100% wherever else he is.
Fair.
And so what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Now I'm just obsessed with that first one.
Awesome.
With Dick and Bruce. Yeah, I could play with that all day long.
We're all about ships here, so
Yeah, we are.
This is a safe space.
Yeah, and fanfic. Like, we are. At least I write fanfic. TJ supportively reads it sometimes.
Excellent. Good job. That's good friending. I still write fanfic for different fandoms that I don't work in professionally, and it's such a great way to honor and be involved with work that you care about. I think it's very on point for a way of interacting with stories, honestly.
Absolutely.
And we've already mentioned Tim Drake a little bit, but how do you feel about his recent coming out storyline?
Well, jealous, because I would have loved to play with something like that, and we couldn't back in the day. But no, that's great. I'm excited to see it. It absolutely makes sense for contemporary readers that he be exploring something like that. It makes sense for him. I understand the reaction of my contemporaries who are like, whoa, but he was, with a girl, and like, I'm bisexual. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really count anything out. So I think that's exciting. I guess the part that I'm jealous about is that so the writer's a screenwriter, right? And it just felt like it got a lot of big attention, and we would do things like that and like nobody batted an eyelid or cared. So I was I had to suppress some professional jealousy over how much attention that got. But as far as the story goes, I think that's great, and I'm completely supportive.
Yeah. So how do you feel queer representation has changed between when you were writing the Bat family titles and now?
Like 180. Well, or at least what has to happen with it, because the bottom line when I was writing is, none of us were straight, but you weren't allowed to put any of that into the comics. And like, that was just completely understood. And the line was, look, at the end of the day, Batman has to sell toothpaste. And I don't know why in the early aughts selling toothpaste and exploring sexual identity were, anathema, but they were like, you just could not put those things together. And these days, I feel like it's the opposite. Like, if you're paying any attention to the readership, you absolutely cannot ignore, genders and sexualities and explorations. It wouldn't make any sense to contemporary readers. So it's fascinating how much that's not even a generation, really. That's, I guess, 20 years, maybe. That's exactly a generation, but what a difference it made.
I think we can guess the answer to this one, but back when you were writing, which Robin would you have made queer if you had free reign to do so?
Oh, well, yeah, Dick, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then it would have been so much fun to have Tim react to that. And, and just, all those dynamics would have been so much fun to play with out in the open. It would have been great if Alfred just suddenly one night is like, well, there was that time in France. You're like, what the?
Right?
Just 100%. There's no way.
So you just have Bruce just sitting there like going, like, what is happening around me right now?
Someone on our show, I think it was Anthony Oliveira, said Alfred's an actor. He was in the military.
Yes, military,
some stuff happened.
Exactly. Of course. Yeah.
100%. I love the mental image you paint of Bruce sitting there among all of the queer family members going,
just sweating.
Am I the straight one?
Yeah.
The token straight.
Slowly realizing that he isn't.
Right. Wait, but I'm the fulcrum around which all of this is. Wait a minute.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Now, we just did an episode on toxic fandom. How do you feel about toxicity in the DC fandom? And what do you think separates useful critical thought and analysis about comics versus toxic takes?
That's a great question. And from the perspective of a creator, the number one thing is whether you're aiming at the work or at the person. And it's absolutely fine to hate everything I've written with a white hot passion and tell me why. I'm completely open to that. It is absolutely not okay to come at me as a human being because you don't know me and my life and my concerns. And like, for instance, we can talk about it more, but the tarantula thing, that was a mistake. I made a really bad mistake and it made people really angry, but it was 20 years ago. I learned a lot from it and I've addressed it repeatedly. So, and I'm happy to talk about it again. I mean, it needs to be talked about. That's how we learn. But but to have someone come at me and literally, like, I had a death threat about it last week, and it's like, wait, you're literally threatening the life of a real living bisexual female over the rape of, I'm sorry, a fictional being. It's just that those priorities are not, and I think a lot of that comes from over identification with the characters, which again I completely understand as a fanficker and an RPer. I get it. I know how angry I've been at what I've perceived as mistreatments, but you have to separate that from the people who are creating them, and you have to look at time. I'm a little worried about, we now expect people not just to be perfect in public all the time, but always, that they had to have been perfect 20 years ago. Like we don't have, there's no learning curve for people. And I think the learning is actually one of the most interesting parts of the journey. And for me, that story is about internalized misogyny. And it's actually a fascinating story that, I love to talk about and but not when someone's sending me death threats, then that kind of, that really stops the conversation. So the other thing is, like, just take a breath and look at the world. And I think some of the criticism is really helpful and valid when we're talking about, representation issues, for example, or things that really need to change to move our social agenda forward. But, when you're really, really flipped out because a ship didn't go the way you want. It's like, there's a little bit more going on in the world than that. Like, bless you that you can be that upset about that.
I think what we're talking about is like people online and in general, that when someone messes up or knows they could do better, we're seeing an unwillingness to like accept an apology, and that people aren't perfect, like you're saying.
Right. And I think those, I've seen imperfect apologies, and I myself have held people accountable to like, it doesn't really sound like you learned anything there. But yes, when someone's really trying to engage in a conversation, the conversation is much more valuable than continuing to posture about how angry you are, your own righteous indignation. And that, of course, it very clearly comes from the need on social media to say everything as loudly and dramatically as possible to get attention, and often from behind the safety of an avatar. And I'm a Gen Xer. Like, we went from not having that available to being the first generation to live most of our lives online. And I completely get the allure of that, but also very much the danger. And Yeah, just think about, would you say that to the person's face, and just remember that they're a person, I guess, is my bottom line there.
Yeah,
And now,
absolutely.
do you mind if we talk about the tarantula thing?
Not at all. No,
Because
please.
someone wanted us to, we had a few people actually bring it up, and I did a little bit of research, and I had seen you'd addressed it ages ago, and I didn't want to bring that back up, but I don't even really know what exactly happened. So if you want to like educate us and tell us the rundown, I would love that.
Sure. So this was in Nightwing, and it was towards the end of my run, not coincidentally. And so a little bit to set the scene, I'd been on the title for 3 or 4 years at that point, and had been working with a group of people that had been there since I first started. Over the course of that run, every single one of them left and disappeared and were replaced. And this was happening on a higher editorial level, and also like my immediate editor. So there were huge sort of corporate shifts going on behind the scenes, and they were having a big impact on how we wrote. Right before sort of Didio and that whole crew came in, it wasn't uncommon to have a 6 or 12 month even outline and sort of go, I'm doing this long story. We're going to break the character down and very slowly build them back up. And there was room for that. And so I was working off one of those, and it was approved. And I was in the nadir of it, the breaking down point. And then suddenly, like, the whole thing was thrown out, and they were like, nope, you got to go script by script from this point on. So the whole sort of rhythm of the story got interrupted. But the story was supposed to be about Dick getting to such a low point that he doesn't murder someone, but he allows a murder to happen right in front of him. And I think we all know that he could stop it if he had really decided to, and he certainly knows that. And he's working at this time with Tarantula, who is one of the many people that on the sort of the fringes of the Bat family that love the the idea of saving Gotham, but come from very different backgrounds and have very different ideas about how that might happen. And so for Tarantula, she was female, she was Latina, the system didn't work for her, and she saw no reason to play by the rules. So she didn't. And Dick had romantically decided he could fix that, right? I'm going to be her knight in shining armor. As long as she's with me, I'll make sure nothing bad happens. But they end up in this epic battle with Blockbuster, who's really, pulled out all the stops. And he's, I can't remember the exact order, but he's made it perfectly clear. He's going to destroy everyone in Nightwing's life one by one, and is never going to stop. And that it's personal and that it's ongoing. And Tarantula's just like, we should just shoot him. And Dick's like, no, we can't do that. But they end up in a stairwell, and she does. And he has a moment, where he's sitting there thinking, stop her. But at the same time, it's echoing in his head. It's never going to stop. He's never going to stop unless we stop him. And he freezes just long enough for her to pull the trigger. That is what the scene is about. So a huge part of my failure is that that's not even the part people remember. What they remember is what happens next, which is that they go up to the roof, and Dick's physically ill. He's like throwing up off the side of the roof. He just can't believe what he just did. He doesn't, how is he going to tell Bruce? He's having a complete crisis, and she's on the high of having just killed an enemy, and sort of climbs on top of him and starts wanting to have sex. And he literally says, no, don't touch me. And she keeps going. And there's one panel, I think, silhouetted of her on top of him, and they're clearly. So that was rightfully called a rape. And so there's several problems. One is that right at that point, Didio decided I shouldn't be writing the title anymore. I don't think because of that, actually. I think he'd already decided, but whatever. So I didn't have time to have any consequences or to discuss any consequences of that. So that act lives in this weird void where Dick didn't get a chance to process it. And I think it could have been interesting and valuable if it had been carefully processed and we dealt with the fallout and the after effects. But it's really, I was gesturing at it allegorically. To me, it was a picture of how out of control of his life he is at this particular moment. And rape is not something that you can use as an allegory, which was the first thing I learned. Right. Although it is a lot in comics, and my background and my peers, like it was used often. So it was powerful to learn that personally, because it would have been hard to learn it from the material around me. It was also unsuccessful because, you know, as I alluded to, it just completely erased what the story was supposed to actually be about, and people were much more fixated. So it was a failure of narrative, as well as, you know, morality. And so there was a lot wrong with it, and people were really angry. And one of the criticisms was that Tarantula was a Mary Sue, and that one pissed me off. And I was much younger, and I kind of grabbed onto that one and said some even stupider things in interviews following up. Like I wanted to talk about the murder, and I think I said at one point, well, I never said it was a rape, you know, which is like he said no, it was clearly a rape, but I was sort of trying to change the conversation. And you know, as a survivor of sexual abuse myself, like I just thought there's no way I could be wrong on this, right? What are they talking about? But I was wrong. But so that's the controversy. And to this day, people are so angry, mostly about the perceived injury to Dick, I think, and the fact that it didn't get processed at all.
Yeah.
Right.
But so, yeah, so that's the story. And it took me, it was probably 7 or 8 years later, I enrolled in an online super MOOC. And it was about using comics. It was with Dr. Christy Blanche, and she was using comics to talk about social issues like gender inequality and race and everything. And during that course, I just had the shock of my life of realizing how much of my own misogyny I hadn't dealt with, and how much I'd internalized. And I grew up in Berkeley. My parents were hippies. Like I went to a liberal arts school. It just hadn't occurred to me I could be as off as I was and know as little as I did about feminism and things like that. And it was just such a tremendous learning experience. And I sort of right after that was like, everybody interview me. I need to talk about this. So that's where the interviews you've seen probably came from, is that period where I was trying to address it educationally. But yeah, we learn in print.
Exactly.
That feels like such a unique kind of challenge for someone who is an ongoing writer, that you aren't not the same person who wrote that, but you are also. So of course, have so that seems like it would be really complicated.
Yeah, like we're all on our own journeys of learning and realizing we can do better. And I mean, you said it yourself, you were wrong. And I think you have to be a pretty big person to admit that. So, you know.
TJ and I say this a lot on different shows that we've been on and this one, but we aren't looking for perfect. We're looking for people who are trying. And honesty. I think the world is so confusing right now, especially right now, always probably, but we're really in a huge existential problem right now. And if, you know, we have to be honest with each other about our foibles and our experiences, and we have to share all the information we have, because that's the only way forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you for confiding all that in us.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, this question feels jarring as the next one now that we've done this.
No, it's fine. And very true to the experience of being a writer, right? You know, you're like, okay, I'm getting death threats for this. What's next on my agenda? You just have to keep going.
Exactly. And next on our agenda, what is the most ridiculous DC Comics hill you will die on?
Oh boy.
For example.
Yes, thank you. Help me.
The first time we asked this question was the week where on Twitter everyone was talking about Batman definitely eats pussy. So like someone said that was their hill they would die on.
That's not a hill. That's a fact. Come on.
But it could be something like that, or just like from writing if you had something.
I do, going back to the ship thing, I just remember I am sort of a Bruce and Selena shipper back when that was not popular. And I just loved the dynamic between them. And she fits so well into his whole thing of constantly facing his shadow selves, you know? You know, there's really... I would sort of die on any of my sexuality hills as a fan. I just wouldn't do it as a professional, because because you have to sometimes tout the company's line. But there's so much stuff I just know to be true. I don't even know what it is that other people think aren't true that I know is true.
I love that. You've got it. You're like, no.
Well, it's this, people ask like about the what did you think of the Batman movie or something? I'm like, I don't watch those. Like I got to have the exact Batman I wanted, the one I believe in on the page. Like I don't really need anybody else's input at this point, which sounds a little rude.
That. No. As a fanfic writer, I get it.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. They're so real to me. And I would die on any of the hills. Like I know these people forward and backward, and I have such long, complicated histories for all of them in my head. And there's just you can't remove one of those pieces and not have the whole thing fall like dominoes. So they're all true. But really, so my inability to answer that question is not that there aren't hills, but that I don't pay attention to other people's hills. So I don't know what other people think is not true.
We will accept it.
Yes.
Thank you.
I saw a tweet recently that I don't know who to credit this to, but that you made me think of, which was, I'm so mad you misinterpret the characters differently than I misinterpret the characters.
That's wonderful. Oh, I love it.
Right. And the moment we've all been waiting for, you have an upcoming graphic novel called Rewild.
Yes.
I'm halfway through and I'm really enjoying it. Can you
so
tell us a little bit about it? And like, if we had to pitch it to our listenership, which is probably fans of your Batman run and stuff like that, like, are there any similar themes we could entice them with?
Well, it definitely is full of my sensibility, which has always been a little dark and non-optimistic, I will say. It's a contemporary cli-fi fantasy horror graphic novel that is looking at the relationship between humans and nature, with nature personified as fae or fairies, who have been so corrupted by our pollution and our ecological destruction that they're basically monsters at this point, and they're pissed and they're coming for us. And so the story is built around one of their changelings presenting herself at a city council meeting to say the fairies have demanded that you build a park, and if you don't build a park, they're going to invade. And the person that she presents this to is a young, ambitious city planner who this is sort of his first big assignment. He doesn't have the power to turn it into a park, even if he wanted to, but he's also responsible for making sure the community feels heard. So he does feel like he has to listen to what she's saying, and he has his own history with mental instability from his family. And so slowly he's, the first thought is she's crazy, then he's like, wait, or am I crazy? And then he starts to realize, no, we're crazy that we're not addressing this problem. Yeah. So it's sort of about the difference between individual and collective insanity, what collective insanity looks like, and where we are in terms of it. I always sort of thought of fairies as personifications of our relationship with nature, that like we made these beautiful little sylvan creatures because that's how we felt about the beauty of the woods and stuff. So like if we've cut down the woods, those same creatures are like, excuse me, need to talk to you about this. So to write that, I absolutely immersed myself in climate nonfiction, and I'm so depressed. It's really, and I didn't finish, I had to finish the book before I finished the research. So the research has continued, even though the story is coming out in December, the graphic novel. And I should mention it's with Burger Books and Dark Horse. And the artist for it, Jana Adamovic, is amazing. And she is based in Serbia. And so she has this sort of Eastern sensibility about fairy tales that comes into the story. And the pages are so gorgeous and filled with every panel is filled with all these stories of the creatures in it. And even I, looking at the pages, still discover something I didn't see the first time. And it's such a joy to go into and look at her work. It's absolutely breathtaking. And we fell in love with these characters and with the story and the urgency of the story. And I live in Northern California. So as I was writing it, we were dealing with, wildfires round 2 or 3, 2 and 3 really. And it's, you feel like you're living in hell, but it's a preview of where we're all going. And so this issue just feels so urgent. But the story is almost a fable. It's a way of looking. It's such difficult issues to talk about. And I don't, as a writer, I feel like part of my responsibility is to motivate people. And the story is very dark. And as I said, it's more pessimistic than not. And I worried about that as I was writing. I'm like, do I owe people hope? But I think what we actually created was space to do some grieving. And I hope that after the grieving, you can move into action, because so much action.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to ask, since I know you're a fic writer and my fic heart is curious, how would you tag it on AO3 if you were going to post it there?
Wow, good question. Let's see. There's depictions of self-harm. There's drinking, drug use, homelessness, and then how do I even say this? Like, I mean, everyone's at risk. So I can't remember what the tag is. But like, yeah, you're meeting characters that you care about. There's like the Demond is the main male protagonist, and he has a sister who's in a lesbian marriage and about to have a baby. And one of the terrors of the story, like I loved that couple so much and I was so invested in them, but as I'm writing, I'm like, I don't really have I'm not moving towards a happy ending. And so it was really hard to figure out how to to be supportive of the characters and also clear about the danger that we're facing.
Yeah. So angst, no happy ending, hurt, no comfort is what I'm hearing.
Excellent. Yes. Perfect.
I'm here for you.
Thank you. Gosh, I clearly need to go back and do some more Tumblr RP. It's been a while.
So
I need my AO3 tags.
I'm here to help you anytime you want.
I'm thinking to myself in my head, that's the real hill I die on, is my current fanfic, but like I shouldn't mention that because I'm very happy that people don't know who I am.
I'm sure it's wonderful wherever it is out there in space.
So many such good writers.
Yes. Oh, 100%. So where can our listeners find you on social media? Obviously not your fan fiction, but you.
I hang out on Twitter as @Gothamette, and I have a website at devingrayson.org, and that has links to a whole bunch of interviews that I've done. And I've tried to sort of do little subsets on them. So like if you wanted to just look up the tarantula thing, you can just keep looking for the tarantula under those and you'll see me talk about it 3,000 times. And and let's see, that's it these days, because I am everywhere else but in secret.
Yes.
That's where writer Devin Grayson is.
Yes. And do you have any other upcoming projects that people should be on the lookout for?
Well, I think we can talk about this now. I actually did a graphic novel adaptation of Tamara Pierce's First Test. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I believe it is coming out next year. Oh, Rebecca Farrow is doing the art. And it's looking gorgeous. And it was long. It's like, I want to say like 300 pages, the graphic novel or something. It's really long. And I remember thinking, like, do they know what they're getting into? I wrote the script for it 6 years ago. So that gives you a sense of how long it's taken to actually get it off the ground.
That is so exciting.
But yes, I think it's finally almost ready. And I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Well, everyone go pick that up, and Rewild and the Green Arrow 80th anniversary issue as well.
Yes, and User and Matador are two other creator-owned projects I have that are both currently available through Image. So I'm supposed to plug those.
Yes, please.
Excellent, and thank you for coming on today. It was so much fun.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking with you both.
Well, thank you so much. Anytime.